Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another one of Mr. Lang's vlogs. Today we are taking a look at the rise of dictators prior to World War II. So this is a very interesting time in the world, if you will, as we had altogether around 5 different leaders that rose up following World War I due to how World War I ended. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. So first, we're going to be looking at a little bit of Stalin this week. Stalin is going to be the leader of the USSR, or also known as the Soviet Union. So we talked about previously that the Soviet Union had gone ahead and, well, has become communist. We're going to talk about what communism is and what it isn't, and the fact that, well, the USSR really even wasn't communist. I know. In fact, the USSR stands for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. Socialist is in there, and we're going to talk about what socialism is as well. We've got Benito Mussolini, who's going to rise to power in Italy. Again, he's going to come. He's going to be really one of the first fascist leaders in Europe, taking power. Almost just a few years after the end of the war, of World War I. Of course, Adolf Hitler we have in Germany, who uses horrible tactics and brainwashing to gain power there. We have Emperor Hirohito, who he inherited power. He's emperor. And his prime minister or minister of war, Hideki Tojo from Japan. And we have Francisco Franco, someone that you don't really hear too much about during World War II because Spain was neutral during World War II. However, he is a fascist leader who is closely aligned with both Hitler and Mussolini, and we're going to talk about that. Now, these countries all have one thing in common, and it's pretty simple. These countries all suffered from both political and economic problems following World War I. And this was literally a gateway for these guys to go ahead and convince the public that they offered a different way to go ahead and relieve these problems, these economic problems that were plaguing these nations. We're going to be talking about that. In fact, we're going to be talking a little bit about really the problems in Germany and how literally the money was so inflated that it was unbelievable how much $1 equaled to a mark at that point. It's pretty crazy. We're going to talk about that. Okay? Alright, so how do we let these 3 people, especially, almost rule the world? Well, this is how. So, first, we do have to go over different types of governments, different terms, for you to really understand this lesson for the entirety of this week. So first, what is a dictator? Well, a dictator is a person who has complete control over a country. Literally, there is no one above or above them. They are above even the Constitution, and if they even have a constitution in their country, they are above the law. And usually, with the dictatorship comes a totalitarian state. Now, a totalitarian state, it's already in the name. It means that the government has complete control or total control, see, totalitarian, total control of its people, meaning that individuals don't have any rights. The government will suppress any type of opposition, again, swiftly and quietly, and sometimes making an example as well. But nevertheless, they have complete and utter control of the country. So what are the different types of governments and terms we're going to be looking at when we look at not only the rise of these dictators before World War II, but of course when we talk about World War II? Well, first we have to talk about what a democracy is, something we see here in the United States. It's literally what the word means, rule by people. Demo, people, crassy, rule. People, the people rule. Now, the government's controlled by its citizens, meaning that the citizens have a right to vote and voice their opinion essentially, to go ahead and make changes. Again, here in the United States, you can, there's a proper channels, but you can make a change as a citizen. You can vote for your leader as a citizen. Again, the rule is by the people. The next up we're going to talk about is socialism. Socialism is where the government owns factories, any type of utilities, any type of transportation, communication systems, and so on in the nation. So although the government owns that, here's where the difference really starts to occur between this and something we see as communism. In the USSR, the government owned all property and means of production. Again, they were socialist. They weren't communist. And there's a big difference we're going to see. The USSR also called themselves communists. Like I said, they were actually socialists. What differs socialism to communism is a few things. Really, one major thing, to be honest. And what we see is that Vladimir Lenin, the man who really was in charge of essentially making Russia, lack of a better term, communist, or during the Bolshevik Revolution, when he seizes control of the government, his goal was to create a socialist nation, but have it go to communism. And we never see that happen. And the big reason why is because, well, Stalin takes charge, and Stalin's not going to be on board with that. Now, you're going to see a picture of this guy right here, Karl Marx. He is the father of communism. And what his a pure communist nation, his definition of it, which has never existed, ever, is this. It's where you have individual ownership not allowed. Instead, collectively, everyone owns the property and means of production. Now, this has never happened. This means essentially you go from a socialist system where you have the government control everything. You have a dictator, a strong leader, a strong government that's going to go ahead and essentially control everything, and then let the power go, and then the people will keep it running. We're going to see that never happens because of human nature. It's hard once power is seized for some people to go ahead and just let it go. We see people like George Washington, who had so much power and could easily do so many different things, honestly, with that power. We see him step away, and it's pretty impressive that he does. Again, Joseph Stalin, the leader of the USSR, is not going to be doing that, that's for sure. Alright, so a couple other different types of governments. Fascism, that's where we see Mussolini and Hitler and their countries. It's basically a political movement that consists of a very strong government headed by a very powerful dictator, by one man, or woman, but in this case, men. This emphasizes the state over the individuals, meaning that what you do is for the good of the state, it's for the good of the country, it's not for the good of you. Again, one of the most famous ones that at least impacts my life is that Mussolini actually gave out medals to anybody who had over 15 children. Why? Because they were doing their part for the state. Essentially, they were raising him an army. My grandfather is number 15 of his child. Well, technically he was a twin, so him and his twin were 14 and 15. And my great-grandmother got a medal from Mussolini because of that. So to give you an idea, it's true. They really did this. So one thing that really sums it up is a quote from Mussolini that says, everything within the state, nothing against the state, nothing outside the state, the masses should only believe, obey, and fight. That tells you right there, again, just what a fascist nation really is. Now, with a fascist nation, there usually are militarist states. Now, a militarist state is where you have the military being the controlling power in government. One thing you're going to notice, and it's kind of hard to see in especially Hitler's photo here, is that they're not wearing what, say, our president wears. When you see our president, he's going to be wearing, or hopefully one day she will be wearing, a suit, right? You see, any of the presidents who are going to be wearing suits. They're not wearing a general, military fatigue. Here we see that, though. Notice, again, especially you can tell with Mussolini, but, Hitler's wearing it too. They are wearing military uniforms. They're not wearing a traditional suit like you would see. So, as North America was actually struggling with the Great Depression, other countries, especially in Europe, was definitely struggling with some political turmoil. Again, most European economies never recovered from World War I very well, Germany being probably the worst. You had high unemployment, food shortages, crime running rampant in these countries, and some are going to see communism as the answer to their political and economic problems. Especially communism, where communism doesn't have unemployment rates because everyone who can work works. That's part of it, which, again, we'll get into. Others are going to want to see a strong military or, again, a fascist government restore law and order because, again, a strong leader is something that they wanted, especially after, in some cases, especially in Germany, where they felt defeated. So the result of these leaders, literally these leaders who become dictators, who suppress all opposition, And people allow that because they are in a place where really, anything's better than where they are. And so they are willing to take that gamble. And unfortunately, these men brainwash and, have their own agendas. So how do we let three people almost rule the world? Well, you're looking at it. This is it right here. This is really what it came down to. It's crazy to think, but it was really this right here. Alright, so let's go over, again, these leaders. Now that we know the government systems, now that we have those terms out of the way, let's go over what these leaders were and how they rose to power. So first, we are going to focus on the Soviet Union, or the USSR. Again, Russia. Although it's really not Russia, again, that's where it was roughly located. And these are what they refer to wrongly as communists. So their leader was a man by the name of Joseph Stalin. He's going to take control after Lenin passes. Again, Lenin passes away, Vladimir Lenin, who was the original leader. And although really Lenin wanted Leon Trotsky, another leader, to take power, Stalin, with a rigged election, does go ahead and, take power. He was ruthless. Again, he had purges where he would just go ahead and kill countless innocent people, including generals. Again, he's going to perceive any type of enemy of the Communist Party. And he's going to make the Soviet Union a totalitarian state. Now, his economic and agricultural policies are going to lead to huge food shortages and the death of 30 million Russians altogether. He was very ruthless. Stalin's going to use assassination of any type of political enemies, rigged elections to gain his power. On the outside, it looked like he gained it legally, but in reality, he really did not. He's going to use things like the Red Army. He's going to use the secret police to crush anybody who opposes him or the government. Again, Italy is actually going to be fascists, so I'll put that up there. Benito Mussolini is going to gain power in Italy. He's going to be known as El Duce. Mussolini is going to essentially pledge to restore Italy to its former glory. He was trying to make it the Roman Empire, and it was a far cry from the Roman Empire in the 1920s. And so he does get appointed, again legally, by as Prime Minister by King Victor Emmanuel III. He grants him dictatorial powers, and he technically gained it all legally. Now, he's going to make Italy a fascist state that's going to oppose all type of democracy. There's one man who's in charge, and that's him. It's very nationalistic. It relies on the military, the secret police, known as the Black Shirts, to maintain absolute control, including control of anything from media to the use of propaganda to spread their type of ideals. Now, we've talked about propaganda in the past. Again, it's things that are supposed to be either sway you for something or against something in this case. And he's going to be swaying you for, to back his vision as making Italy back to the Roman Empire. So what are some of Mussolini's policies? Well, first, he's going to limit freedom of speech. He's going to arrest any type of political opponents to get rid of any type of competition. He's going to restrict voting, forbid any other political parties. He's going to teach total obedience, and how to even be the ideal family man. He actually becomes this, as crazy as it sounds, he actually becomes this, role model of how to be a family man with his wife and his children. And yet he had many mistresses on the side. In fact, when he is caught and killed and strung up in Italy, spoiler alert, during the war, he does go ahead and he's strung up along with his mistress, one of his mistresses. So the first thing Italy does, Mussolini does, is invade Ethiopia. Again, if you remember during imperialism, Ethiopia was one of the few countries that were still independent in Africa, and the reason why was because Menelik II beat back the Italian army. Well, this is their revenge, and they are going to be brutal. They're going to bomb Red Cross hospitals on purpose, and they're just going to create so much savagery, it's insane. Again, America's going to decide to essentially embargo both sides and stay neutral. Remember, this is a time in our nation's history where we want to be neutral. We want to stay out of European affairs. It's crazy over there, and we just don't want to deal with that. So, in Spain, we also have fascist rise under Francisco Franco. What this fascist leader who he is he basically attacked and overthrew the Spanish government, causing a civil war in the country versus the previously elected government. He had the military support of Hitler and Mussolini. They were all friends. And the USSR is going to actually have kind of back the other side, the loyalists that were still loyal to the original government, and they call themselves the Popular Front. Stalin is here going to literally declare communism and fascism enemies, and that's important because, again, we're going to see they are going to be on opposite sides of this war. All right, Japan, we are going to have militarists, essentially. Their leader is the Emperor Hirohito, and, of course, the Minister of War, Hideki Tojo. Again, Japan's economy was very much dependent on world trade. Not much actually grows there. In fact, even today, some of their biggest exports is technology because, again, the island of Japan itself has very limited resources. So, of course, they're going to have to, rely on things like oil. In fact, they relied on oil from us, which may cause some rift down the road. So the crisis in the economy, the global depression, is going to allow military leaders to promise more land to Japan for raw materials and natural resources and be less reliant on imports. They are going to go ahead and attempt to take over other countries to gain their resources. They're going to invade Manchuria, China in 1931, and they, of course, are going to bomb and capture Nanjing, which is a full-scale war with the Chinese. Imperial Japan is born here. They are taking over other countries to gain their resources. Again, the League of Nations condemns this, but they can't do anything to prevent it. Again, they don't have any power. So, of course, what happens? Japan walks out of the League of Nations, setting a precedent that the League of Nations doesn't have a backbone. Problems they'll fix when it comes to the UN. All right, what about Germany? Germany has fascists. Again, their leader is Adolf Hitler, or Der Führer. Again, he and his Nazi party are going to be elected in 1933, and he becomes the Chancellor of Germany. He abolishes all other political parties and any type of unions or anything like that. Now, they claim that he had solutions to bring Germany out of the Great Depression and restore it to glory. That's what he promised his people. Again, what he did was he made something like this, which is 1 million Mark, which is $1 million German dollars. He's going to make this worth something, because in the 1920s it wasn't worth anything. That couldn't buy you anything. And the reason why is because of the huge inflation after World War I. At one point, $1 US is going to be worth trillions of marks. And that's because their money was useless. The whole country was in bankrupt because of the war debt they had to pay. So he's going to make that worth something again, and that's why people are going to start to back him. So he's going to resent the war guilt clause and paying any type of reparations or damages from World War I. He's going to say that the Germans aren't responsible for it, nor should they have been. He's going to be ruthless as a dictator. He's going to rule with intimidation, fear, and intense racism against the Jewish people. So when Hitler served in World War I, as we kind of talked about a little bit, so I'm going to skip through that real quick. He's going to go ahead and earn the Iron Cross. His first success in life really was the military, and he kind of embodies that. The Nazi Party becomes one of many political parties in Germany before Hitler gained power. And Hitler's going to actually try to overthrow the government in something called the Beer Hall Putsch. It's not going to go well. It's not going to go well for him. He was young. He did a horrible job. He was jailed. And while he was in jail, he dictates Mein Kampf, which means my struggle. It's his book, which outlines really his vision for essentially Germany at this point. It's soon published, and he plans to restore Germany to power. And he does horrible things in Mein Kampf, like blaming the Jewish people, communists, and so on, for Germany's decline, which is 100% not true. But again, this is that propaganda he was giving to people, feeding them essentially that. Nazis are going to set fire to the Reichstag, which is essentially the parliament, and when they blame the fire on the communists, Hitler's biggest competitors, he's going to ask for a vote in an opera house across the street where he gets full dictatorial powers. Again, It's a scary time. He calls his government the Third Reich, and the reason why is that means, like, essentially the Third Empire here. We had the first one, which was when Germany was born, 1881. The second one was after World War I, which is known as the Weimar Republic, and then the third one is this one right here. They're going to outlaw any other type of political parties. He's going to murder his competition using his secret police, the brown shirts. He's going to prohibit Jewish people and non-Nazis from holding any type of political office. And again, he rules with utter racism. It is horrible to see what he does during World War II. He creates this insane anti-Semitic feeling in Germany. Anti-Semitism, if you don't know, is hatred or discrimination against the Jewish people. He asked for a vote in the Upper House to get those powers, which he did. He uses the Jewish people as scapegoats for all of Germany's problems, unfortunately. He literally blames them for everything when they had nothing to do with any of it. Now, if you don't know what a scapegoat is, it's someone or in this case, a group of people who are blamed for something they didn't do. One big example is Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. This happens November 9th, 1938. Nazi thugs burned down synagogues, destroyed Jewish businesses, simply, again, because they were Jewish. And where's the United States in all this? We're sleeping. We're sleeping, all right. We're sleeping in a separate bed. And literally, as you can see, we are completely isolated from all this. We don't want anything to do with this. Again, that's Europe's problem. Europe can go deal with their own stuff. We've got our own problems to deal at home with the Great Depression. So we say we're completely out of this. Crazy, right? Isolationism to a T. All right, well, there you have it. So, again, that's our lesson on the rise of dictators and militarism in Europe during the 1920s and 1930s. Again, this is going to be a direct relation right into World War II, which we're going to be studying right after this. All right. Have a great rest of your day, guys.